The truck's engine cut out with a sound like something dying. Mara Kessler sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, staring through the cracked windshield at the place that would either save her or finish what life had started. The Broken Creek Ranch sprawled across the valley like a scar, barbed wire, weathered wood, dust that never settled. Heat shimmered off the metal roofs of distant barns. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere else, men were already working. She'd walked 6 miles before dawn just to catch this ride. Her boots had blisters on top of blisters. Her lower back ached in that deep, permanent way that comes from sleeping on floors and couches that weren't hers. "You sure about this?" the driver asked. He was younger than her by maybe 15 years, with sun-damaged skin and eyes that had already decided she wouldn't last. Mara didn't answer. She opened the door and stepped down onto the ground that felt as unforgiving as everything else in her life. The ranch yard opened up before her, a chaos of movement and noise, men hauling supplies, trucks kicking up dust, horses tied to posts, flicking flies with their tails. Everything smelled like manure and sweat and engine oil. Nobody looked at her. Nobody stopped working. She might as well have been invisible. She'd been invisible for years. The main office sat at the edge of the yard, a low building with peeling paint and a screen door that hung crooked on its hinges. Mara walked toward it, aware of her reflection in the dusty windows of passing trucks. A woman who didn't belong here. Too old. Too soft. Too worn down by a life that had chewed her up and spit her out in places like this. Inside, the office was dim and smelled like cigarettes and old paper. A fan turned lazy circles overhead, doing nothing for the heat. Behind a cluttered desk sat a man with a face like a clenched fist, red, tight, perpetually angry. His name was Harlan Yates, and he was the foreman. Mara had spoken to him once on the phone, a conversation so brief it barely counted. "You the Kessler woman?" he asked, not looking up from whatever paperwork he was pretending to read. "Yes, sir." "You're late. Truck broke down outside Millerville. I walked the rest." That got his attention. He looked up, eyes scanning her like she was livestock he was deciding whether to buy. His expression didn't change, but something flickered there. Amusement, maybe. Or cruelty. Sometimes they looked the same. "How old are you?" 43. Jesus. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "You got experience with ranch work?" "Some. Worked a dairy farm in Nebraska for 2 years. Before that, I did maintenance at a..." "Can you lift 50 pounds?" "Yes, sir." "Can you work 12 hours in 100-degree heat?" "Yes, sir." He stared at her. She stared back. Outside, someone shouted something she couldn't make out, and another voice answered with laughter. "You know what kind of work this is?" Harlan asked. "This ain't pushing a mop around some warehouse. This is fence posts and barbed wire. This is mud and blood and getting knocked on your ass by animals that outweigh you by 1,000 pounds. You understand that?" "I understand. Do you?" He stood up, walked around the desk. Up close, he smelled like chewing tobacco and contempt. "Because I've had men, young men, strong men, quit after 3 days. Had one kid last summer who cried so hard he threw up. You think you're tougher than them?" Mara didn't flinch. "I think I need this job more than they did." Something changed in his face. Not softness. Nothing in Harlan Yates was soft, but a kind of ugly curiosity, like he'd just thought of something entertaining. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll give you a shot." Relief tried to flood through her, but she held it back. She'd learned not to trust relief. "But," Harlan continued, walking back to his desk, "I'm putting you on Calder's crew." The way he said it, like a sentence, not an assignment. "Is that a problem?" Mara asked. Harlan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You'll find out." He scribbled something on a piece of paper, shoved it across the desk. "Bunkhouse is past the main barn. You got 10 minutes to drop your shit and get to the south fence line. Calder doesn't wait for anybody." Mara took the paper. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She left the office and walked back into the brutal sunshine. The bunkhouse was easy to find, a long, low building that looked like it had been built sometime before anyone cared about comfort. Inside, it was dim and smelled like sweat and mildew. Rows of narrow beds lined both walls, most of them unmade. A few workers sat on bunks, pulling on boots or drinking water from plastic bottles. They looked up when she entered. One of them, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, elbowed his neighbor. "Holy shit," he muttered, not quite under his breath. Mara found an empty bunk near the back, dropped her duffel bag on the thin mattress. She didn't have much. A change of clothes, a toothbrush, a book she'd been carrying for 3 years and hadn't finished. Everything she owned fit in one bag that had cost $6 at a Goodwill in Tulsa. "You lost?" someone asked. She turned. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the sun. Tall, lean, younger than her, but not by much. He had the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped caring. "No," Mara said. "I'm supposed to report to the south fence line." "Calder's crew?" "That's what they told me." The man laughed. It wasn't a friendly sound. "Good luck with that." He walked away. Mara stood there for a moment, alone in the dim room, feeling the weight of every choice that had brought her here. Then she laced up her boots, tightened the belt on her jeans, and walked back outside. The south fence line was a 20-minute walk through scrub grass and dust. By the time Mara arrived, her shirt was stuck to her back with sweat, and her breathing came hard. Ahead, a group of men worked along a stretch of broken fence, pulling posts, stringing wire, hammering stakes into ground that looked like it had never been soft. She spotted the crew leader immediately. Rhett Calder. He stood apart from the others, inspecting a section of wire with the kind of focus most people reserve for brain surgery. He was maybe 6'2", built like someone who'd spent his entire life doing work that required both strength and precision. Dark hair, sun-darkened skin, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from something harder than bone. He wore a faded gray shirt with the sleeves torn off, jeans that had seen better decades, and boots that were older than most of the men on his crew. And he didn't look up when Mara approached. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm supposed to—" "Grab a post," Rhett said, still not looking at her. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. "Start at the marker 40 yards down. Space them 6 feet apart. Holes need to be 2 feet deep." "I'm Mara Kessler. I don't care who you are." Now he looked at her. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale gray, cold, giving nothing away. "You're here to work, so work." One of the other men, a stocky guy with a sunburned nose, laughed. "You sure about that, boss? She looks like she might break." "Then she breaks," Rhett said. He turned back to the wire. "Not my problem." Mara felt something twist in her chest. Not anger, not hurt. Something older and deeper, the kind of feeling you get when you realize nobody's going to help you, nobody's going to make it easier, and if you want to survive, you're going to have to do it alone. She walked to the pile of fence posts. They were wooden, rough-cut, heavy. Each one probably weighed 45 pounds. She picked one up, felt the splinters bite into her palms, and started walking. 40 yards down the fence line, she found the marker, a strip of orange cloth tied to a post. She set down the heavy beam, grabbed a post hole digger from the tool pile, and drove it into the ground. The earth fought back. Every thrust of the digger sent shocks up through her arms, into her shoulders, down her spine. The sun hammered her from above. Sweat poured into her eyes. Her hands, already soft from months without hard labor, started to tear within the first 10 minutes. Nobody helped. Nobody offered advice. Rhett worked 30 yards away, moving with a rhythm that looked almost mechanical. He didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't check on her. The other men spread out along the line, some digging, some stringing wire, all of them moving with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Mara was not one of those people. Her first hole took 45 minutes. When she finally got the post in and tamped down, it leaned at an angle that made it look drunk. "That won't hold," a voice said behind her. She turned. One of the crew members stood there, a younger guy with arms like tree trunks, and a face that suggested he'd never had a complicated thought in his life. "What?" Mara asked, wiping sweat from her face. "Your post. It's crooked. Calder's gonna make you redo it." "How do I—" "Not my job to teach you." He walked away. Mara looked at the post. He was right. It was crooked. She pulled it out, widened the hole, tried again. This time it stood straighter, but the hole wasn't deep enough. She dug more. Her hands were bleeding now, the blisters torn open, mixing blood with dirt and sweat. By lunch, she'd managed 3 posts. The rest of the crew had done 15 each. They ate in the shade of a water truck, passing around sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and drinking from canteens that had seen better days. Mara sat apart, unwrapping the sad peanut butter sandwich she'd made that morning in a gas station bathroom. Nobody spoke to her. A few of them whispered, though, glancing her way and laughing. Rhett sat on the tailgate of his truck, eating in silence. His eyes scanned the work they'd done, cataloging every flaw, every weakness. When his gaze passed over Mara's 3 crooked posts, his expression didn't change. No disappointment, no anger, just cold assessment. "Afternoon's going to be hotter," he said to the crew. "We need another 100 yards done before sundown. Anyone who can't keep pace can leave now." He looked directly at Mara when he said it. She looked right back and said nothing. The afternoon was worse. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into something you had to fight just to breathe. Mara's hands were destroyed, raw meat wrapped around bones. Every time she gripped the post hole digger, fresh blood seeped through the dirt caked on her palms. Her back screamed. Her shoulders felt like someone had driven nails through them. She kept working. One post, then another, then another. Around her, the crew moved like a machine. They didn't talk much, didn't joke. This wasn't the kind of work you could do while chatting. This was survival, stripped down to its simplest form: move or die. At one point, Mara's vision started to blur. She stumbled, caught herself on a post, breathed hard until the world stopped tilting. When she looked up, Rhett was watching her. He didn't say anything, didn't offer water, just watched, then went back to work. By the time the sun started its descent toward the horizon, Mara had managed 8 posts. Her clothes were soaked through. Her face was burned. Her hands were hamburger. But 8 posts stood in the ground, and they were straight. Rhett walked the line one final time, checking every post, every hole, every strand of wire. When he got to Mara's section, he stopped, tested the first post with his hand, then the second, then the third. He looked at her. "Tomorrow, you need to do 20. Then he walked away. The crew packed up tools in silence. Mara bent to pick up the post hole digger, and her hands wouldn't close. The muscles had seized up, locked in position. She had to force them open, and when she did, the pain was bright and immediate. The walk back to the bunkhouse felt longer than the walk out. Every step hurt. Every breath hurt. Hurt had become the only constant. Inside, the bunkhouse was filling up with workers from other crews. They were loud, laughing, talking shit about their day. When Mara walked in, the noise didn't stop, but it changed, became pointed. "How'd she do?" someone asked. "Shit, I heard she only got 8 posts done." "8? My grandmother could do better than that, and she's been dead 5 years. Laughter, cruel and easy. Mara walked to her bunk, sat down slowly. Her body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. She pulled off her boots. A mistake, because her feet were swollen and blistered, and getting the leather off made her bite back a sound she refused to let become a scream. "Hey!" She looked up. The kid from earlier, the one who'd made the comment when she first arrived, stood at the foot of her bunk. He had a beer in one hand and a smile that was all edges. "You gonna make it?" he asked. "Yeah," Mara said. "Really? Because I got $20 says you're gone by Friday." She met his eyes. "Then you're going to lose $20. He laughed. "We'll see." After he left, Mara sat in the dim light, staring at her ruined hands. She should wash them, bandage them, do something to prevent infection. But moving felt impossible. So she just sat there, alone in a room full of people, feeling every year of her 43 on this earth pressing down like a weight she couldn't put down. Outside, the sun finally dropped below the horizon. Darkness came fast, the way it does in places far from cities. Somewhere, a coyote called. Somewhere else, an engine turned over and died. Mara lay back on the thin mattress, stared at the ceiling, and made herself a promise. Tomorrow, she would do better. Not because she wanted to prove them wrong, but because giving up would mean going back to the nothing she'd run from. And nothing was worse than this. The night passed in fragments of sleep broken by pain. Every position hurt. Every movement woke fresh agony in muscles she'd forgotten existed. Around her, the bunkhouse filled with the sounds of men sleeping, snoring, muttering, shifting in their narrow beds. Mara didn't sleep so much as survive the darkness. When the first light crept through the windows, she forced herself upright. Her hands had scabbed overnight. The blood dried into patterns that cracked when she tried to flex her fingers. Her back was a sheet of fire, but she stood up. The other workers were stirring, moving slow, groggy. Mara dressed in the same clothes she'd worn yesterday. She only had one other set, and she was saving it. She pulled on her boots, each movement a negotiation with pain. Outside, the ranch was already alive. The sky was still gray with dawn, but the work had started. Mara walked to the mess hall, a building that served food that was more fuel than meal. She got a plate of scrambled eggs that looked like yellow rubber and toast that could double as a weapon. She ate alone, forcing down every bite because her body needed it. Then she walked back to the south fence line. Rhett was already there. Of course he was. He stood at the water truck, filling canteens, his movements efficient and practiced. He didn't look up when Mara approached, didn't acknowledge her presence, just kept working. "Morning," Mara said. No response. She grabbed her post-hole digger from where she'd left it yesterday, walked to where her last post stood, and started on the next hole. The crew filtered in over the next 20 minutes. Some looked surprised to see her. Others looked disappointed, like they'd bet against her and were already mourning their money. Rhett addressed them without preamble. "We've got 200 yards today. Same standards as yesterday. No excuses." He assigned sections. When he got to Mara, he pointed to a stretch of ground that looked even harder than yesterday's. "You're there. 20 posts minimum." "Understood," Mara said. One of the crew members, the stocky one with the sunburned nose, laughed. 20? She couldn't even do 10 yesterday. Rhett looked at him. Just looked. The laughter died. "Get to work," Rhett said. They worked. Mara's hand screamed with every grip of the digger. The scabs broke open within the first hour, fresh blood mixing with old. But she'd learned something yesterday. A rhythm. She couldn't match the others in strength, but she could match them in stubbornness. One hole, one post, one step at a time. Around her, the crew moved with brutal efficiency. They didn't talk to her, didn't help her, but they didn't mock her either, not while Rhett was watching. And Rhett was always watching. He moved up and down the line like a ghost, appearing suddenly to check a post, test a wire, correct a mistake. His standards were impossible. More than once, Mara saw him make someone tear out a post and redo it because it was an inch too shallow or a degree too crooked. He was hardest on himself. At one point, Mara watched him spend 20 minutes on a single section of wire, adjusting the tension until it was perfect. His hands moved with a precision that seemed at odds with the brutal nature of the work. When he finally stepped back, satisfied, he noticed her watching. "Something wrong with your section?" he asked. "No," Mara said. "Then why aren't you working on it?" She turned back to her hole without answering. The sun climbed, the heat built. Mara's vision started to swim again, but she pushed through it. She'd learned to recognize the signs now, the blurring, the dizziness, the way sounds got distant. She'd stop, breathe, drink water, then go back to work. By lunch, she'd done 12 posts. Progress. Slow, painful, but real. The crew ate in the shade again. Mara sat apart, drinking water and eating an apple that was more bruised than fruit. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. "You know you don't have to do this." She looked up. One of the workers stood there, not the mean one, but not the friendly one either. Somewhere in between. "Do what?" Mara asked. "Kill yourself for this job. There's easier work. Hell, there's easier ranches." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Mara thought about that. "Because I don't have anywhere else to be." The man nodded slowly, like that made sense to him. "Yeah," he said. "I get that." He walked away. Mara finished her apple, core and all, then stood up to face the afternoon. If the morning was hard, the afternoon was violence. The temperature hit triple digits, the ground baked, the air shimmered with heat that felt like it was cooking her from the inside out. Mara's hands, already destroyed, became something beyond pain, just wet things at the end of her arms that barely functioned. But she kept working. 13, 14, 15. Her back gave out around post 16. She was lifting it into position when something in her lower spine made a sound like grinding metal, and her legs went weak. She dropped to one knee, gasping, the post falling sideways. "Get up." Rhett's voice. Cold. Empty. Mara looked up at him. He stood 3 feet away, holding a roll of wire, face expressionless. "I just need a minute," she said. "You don't get minutes. Get up." "I'm trying. Try harder." Something in his tone cut through the pain. Not cruelty. Not indifference. Something else. Something that sounded almost like belief? No. That was stupid. Rhett Calder didn't believe in anything except work. Mara stood. Her back screamed. Her legs shook, but she stood. She lifted the post, set it in the hole, tamped it down. 16. Rhett watched her for a moment longer, then walked away without a word. By the time the sun started to set, Mara had 21 posts in the ground. She stood at the end of her section, swaying slightly, looking at the work she'd done. It wasn't pretty. Some posts leaned a little, some holes could have been deeper, but it was done, and it would hold. Rhett walked the line again, as he did every evening. When he got to her section, he tested each post methodically. Mara watched, too tired to care what he found. He got to the last one, tested it, stood back. "Tomorrow, same thing," he said. 21 posts. Then, just as he started to walk away, he stopped, turned back. "You did 21 today." It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact. "Yes," Mara said. Something flickered across Rhett's face, too fast to read. The others averaged 19. Then he walked away, leaving Mara standing there, trying to figure out if that had been a compliment or just another fact. That night, the bunkhouse was quieter. The jokes had stopped mostly. A few workers still placed bets, but the laughter was nervous now, uncertain. Mara collapsed onto her bunk, every muscle in her body staging a revolt. She should eat, should drink more water, should take care of her hands. But moving seemed like a task beyond human capability. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, it was dark. The bunkhouse was full of sleeping men, and there, on the small table next to her bunk, sat something that hadn't been there before. A small tin. Mara picked it up, her ruined hands barely able to grip it. The label was worn, but she could make out the words, "hand salve." She opened it. The smell was medicinal and sharp. She scooped out a small amount, spread it across her torn palms. The relief was immediate, not complete, not even close, but enough to make breathing easier. She looked around the dark bunkhouse. Everyone was asleep, or pretending to be. Someone had left this for her. She knew who. Mara lay back down, the tin clutched in her bandaged hands, and for the first time since arriving at Broken Creek Ranch, she felt something that might have been hope, or might have been delusion. Time would tell. The days blurred together after that, one brutal shift after another, each one testing whether Mara had anything left to give. And somehow, impossibly, she kept finding more. 21 posts became 22. 22 became 25. Her hands healed in layers, scabs over wounds, over calluses that grew thick as leather. Her back stopped screaming and settled into a constant, manageable ache. Her arms developed muscles she didn't know she could build at her age. The crew stopped betting on when she'd quit. They started betting on whether she'd outlast the new kids. Rhett never got easier, never praised her, never showed anything that looked like approval, but the salve kept appearing on her bunk. Sometimes it was bandages. Once, it was a pair of work gloves that fit her hands perfectly. Never with a note. Never with explanation. Just there. Mara never thanked him, never acknowledged the gifts. She understood somehow that this was a conversation being held in silence, and words would ruin it. 3 weeks in, something changed. They were working a section of fence near the North Ridge when one of the newer workers, a cocky kid named Jake, who thought strength was the same as skill, made a mistake. He'd set a post without checking the hole depth, and when Rhett tested it, the whole thing tilted like a tree in a storm. "Tear it out," Rhett said. "Do it again." "Are you serious?" Jake laughed. "It's fine." "It's not. Man, it's close enough. Nobody's gonna—" Rhett's hand shot out, grabbed the post, and with one hard yank pulled it completely out of the ground. He threw it at Jake's feet. "Do it again." Jake's face went red. "You know what? Screw this. I don't need this shit." He threw down his gloves and started walking toward the truck. "Then leave," Rhett called after him. "But you don't get paid for incomplete work." Jake spun around. "That's bullshit. That's the rule." For a second, it looked like Jake might do something stupid. His hands clenched into fists. His jaw worked like he was chewing through words he wanted to spit. Then Mara spoke. "He's right." Everyone turned to look at her. She stood 20 yards away, covered in dirt, holding a post that probably weighed more than she did 2 months ago. "The hell do you know?" Jake snapped. Mara set down her post carefully. "I know that if you half-ass it, somebody else has to come fix it later. Probably in worse conditions. Probably when it matters. Nobody asked you. No, Mara agreed. But I'm telling you anyway, do the work right or don't do it at all. Jake stared at her, then at Rhett, then back at her. Whatever, he muttered. He grabbed the post, threw it back in the hole, and started digging with movements that were all anger and no efficiency. Rhett watched for a moment, then walked over to where Mara stood. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. I know. Why did you? Mara looked at him, really looked. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the scars on his hands, the weight he carried in his shoulders. Because somebody needs to, she said. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Two people who'd been broken by different things but had learned the same lesson. Survival isn't about being strong. It's about refusing to stay down. Rhett nodded once. Get back to work. Yes, sir. But as she walked away, she caught something she'd never seen before. The ghost of a smile. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. The summer heat peaked and started its slow descent toward something that might eventually become fall. Mara's body had transformed, not into something beautiful or perfect, she'd never be that, but into something harder, more durable, something that could take punishment and keep functioning. The crew accepted her now. Not warmly, not like family, but like a tool they'd learned to rely on. They nodded when she showed up in the morning, shared their water when hers ran out, stopped treating her like entertainment. But Harlan, the foreman, never stopped hating her. She'd see him sometimes, watching from his truck with eyes full of something ugly. He'd wanted her to fail, needed her to fail. And every day she showed up was another day his expectations got proven wrong. It was only a matter of time before he did something about it. The confrontation came on a Friday, at the end of a week that had been harder than most. The crew was packing up tools when Harlan's truck rolled up, dust billowing behind it like smoke. He got out, walked straight to Rhett. Need to talk to you. Rhett didn't look up from the wire he was coiling. So talk. Private. Now Rhett looked at him. Something in his eyes could have cut glass. Whatever you've got to say, you can say it here. Harlan's jaw worked. He glanced at Mara and she saw it. The calculation, the cruelty, the decision being made. Fine, Harlan said. I'm reassigning your crew. Why? Because I can. You're taking the East Valley starting Monday. Means longer days, harder ground, and I'm cutting your crew by 2. Which 2? Harlan smiled. Kessler and Morrison. Morrison was one of the newer guys, young and strong but green. Losing him would hurt. But losing Mara? No, Rhett said. Excuse me? I said no. Mara stays. The crew had gone silent. Everyone watching now, the air thick with tension. I don't recall asking for your opinion, Harlan said. I'm the foreman. I assign workers where I need them. And I'm telling you, she stays on my crew. Harlan took a step closer. You got a reason for that? Or you just got a thing for old, fat women? The words landed like a slap. Mara felt her face burn, but she didn't move. Didn't speak. This wasn't her fight. Rhett's expression didn't change. My reason is she works harder than half the men here and doesn't bitch about it. That good enough for you? Not really. Then I guess we have a problem. They stared at each other. Two men who'd probably never liked each other, finally finding a reason to make it official. You know, Harlan said slowly, there's other ranches. If you don't like how I run this one, maybe you should try them. Maybe I will. You threatening to quit? I'm saying, Rhett replied, his voice flat and cold, that if Mara goes, you're going to need a new crew leader for the south fence. Because I walk. The silence that followed was absolute. Harlan's face went through several colors, settling on a shade of red that suggested a blood pressure crisis. You serious? Yeah. Over her? Rhett finally turned to face him fully. Over the principle that good workers don't get punished because you've got a problem with how they look. Mara's heart was hammering. This was wrong. Rhett couldn't risk his job for her. Shouldn't. She was nobody. Nothing. A woman who'd stumbled onto this ranch 2 months ago with nothing and would leave with the same. She stepped forward. It's fine, I'll... No, Rhett said, not looking at her. You won't. Harlan laughed. It was an ugly sound. This is beautiful. You're really going to throw away 5 years here for 6 years, Rhett corrected. And yeah, I am. The foreman looked around at the crew, saw no support there, and his expression turned mean. Fine, she stays. For now. But don't think this is over, Calder. I'll be watching, both of you. And the second either one of you screws up, we won't, Rhett said. Harlan spat in the dirt, got back in his truck, and drove away fast enough to spray gravel. The crew stood frozen, not quite sure what they'd just witnessed. Rhett went back to coiling wire like nothing had happened. Pack up, he told them. We're done for the day. They packed up. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Mara waited until the others had walked back toward the bunkhouse before approaching Rhett. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yeah, I did. Why? He finished with the wire, set it down, finally looked at her. Because you earned your place here. And I'm not letting some asshole take that away because it makes him feel small. He's going to make your life hell. Let him try. Rhett picked up his toolbox. Go eat something. You look like shit. Thanks. I mean it. You're no good to me if you collapse. He started walking. Mara watched him go. This man who'd been nothing but cold and distant for 2 months, who'd just risked everything for a woman he barely spoke to. Rhett, she called. He stopped. Turned. Thank you. He stood there for a long moment, silhouetted against the setting sun, and Mara realized she'd never actually said his name out loud before. It felt strange, personal. Don't thank me yet, he said. This isn't over. Then he walked away, leaving Mara alone with the fence they'd built together, and the strange, terrifying feeling that somewhere along the way she'd stopped being alone. And she had no idea what to do with that. The weekend came and went like a held breath. Mara spent most of it in the bunkhouse, letting her body recover from the week's damage. She'd learned that rest wasn't weakness, it was maintenance. The other workers came and went, some heading into town for drinking and whatever else men did when they had money and time. A few invited her along, awkward and uncertain, like they weren't sure if including her was charity or courtesy. She declined, not out of pride, but because she knew she didn't fit in those spaces. Never had. Sunday evening, she sat on the front steps of the bunkhouse, watching the sun paint the valley in colors that almost made the harshness look beautiful. Morrison, the young guy Harlan had tried to cut from the crew, came and sat beside her. He had a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, even though he couldn't have been old enough for either. You think he'll really come after us? Morrison asked. Harlan? Yeah. Mara considered that. Probably. Doesn't that scare you? Everything scares me, she said. I just don't let it stop me anymore. Morrison took a drag from his cigarette, exhaled slowly. Calder really put his ass on the line for you. For both of us, I guess, but mostly you. I know. Why do you think he did that? Mara didn't have an answer. Or rather, she had too many answers, none of them complete. Because Rhett was fair. Because he hated Harlan. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, something had shifted between them that neither of them had acknowledged. I don't know, she said finally. Well, Morrison said, standing up and stretching, whatever the reason, I'm glad he did. You're all right, Kessler, for an old lady. He grinned to show he was joking. Mara threw a pebble at him. He dodged it, laughing, and walked back inside. Mara sat there until the stars came out, trying not to think about what Monday would bring. Monday brought hell. The East Valley was everything Harlan had promised, and worse. The terrain was brutal, rocky, uneven, with patches of ground so hard it was like trying to dig through concrete. The fence line stretched for what looked like miles, broken and neglected, probably years behind on maintenance. And they were doing it with a crew of 6 instead of 8. Rhett stood at the edge of the work site, surveying the damage with an expression that gave nothing away. The rest of the crew waited, silent, knowing better than to complain before the work even started. All right, Rhett finally said. We've got 3 weeks to get this section operational. That means we're doing twice the work in the same amount of time. That's impossible, someone muttered. Then we'll do the impossible. Rhett's eyes scanned the crew, landing on each person in turn. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be the hardest 3 weeks of your lives. You're going to bleed. You're going to hurt. Some of you are going to think about quitting. He paused. But if we get this done, if we show Harlan and everyone else on this ranch what this crew can do, there won't be a job here we can't handle. We'll be the ones they call when shit needs doing right. It wasn't quite a pep talk. Rhett didn't do inspiration. But there was something in his voice that made Mara believe him anyway. A certainty that cut through doubt like wire cutters through fence. Mara, Rhett said, you're on post with Morrison. I want 50 done by end of day. 50. Between two people. In ground that fought back. We'll get it done, Mara said. Rhett nodded. I know you will. They got started. If the south fence line had been hard, the east valley was punishment. Every thrust of the post hole digger hit rock or root. The sun felt closer here, more vicious, like it had a personal grudge, and the weight of Harlan's expectations, his hope that they'd fail, pressed down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Mara and Morrison worked side by side, developing a rhythm that was part cooperation, part competition. He was stronger, could drive the digger deeper with each thrust, but she was more patient, more willing to work around obstacles instead of through them. By noon, they had 18 posts done. Not good enough. We need to move faster, Morrison said, wiping sweat from his face. We need to work smarter, Mara countered. Look at the ground. See those patches where it's lighter? That's softer soil. We space the posts to hit those spots when we can. Morrison looked skeptical. Calder said 6 feet apart. Exactly. Calder said get 50 posts done. We can't do that if we spend an hour fighting rock for every hole. You want to change his plan? I want to finish the job. Morrison thought about it, then shrugged. All right, your funeral if he's pissed. They adjusted their approach, aiming for the softer ground where they could, fighting through the hard patches when they had no choice. It wasn't perfect. Some posts ended up 6.5 feet apart, others 5.5, but they all went in straight and deep. By the time Rhett came to check their section at the end of the day, they had 53 posts standing. He walked the line slowly, testing each one, measuring the spacing with his eyes. Mara watched him, her heart doing something stupid in her chest. If he made them redo this, if he tore out the posts that weren't exactly spaced, Rhett stopped at the end of the line, turned around, looked at Mara. You changed the spacing. Yes, Mara said. The ground? I can see the ground. He walked back to where she stood. You prioritize completion over precision. The posts are solid, they'll hold. That's not what I asked. Mara met his eyes. You said get 50 done. We got 53 done. If that's wrong, then I'm sorry, but I'd make the same call again. For a long moment, Rhett just looked at her. Morrison had gone very quiet beside her, probably calculating how fast he could distance himself from this decision. Then Rhett nodded. Good. Good? The spacing's fine, posts are solid, and you used your head instead of just following orders. He turned to address the whole crew. That's what I need from all of you. Think, adapt, get the job done right, but don't be so rigid you break when things change. He walked away, leaving Mara standing there, trying to figure out if she'd just been complimented or if hell had frozen over. Did that just happen? Morrison asked quietly. I think so. Calder just said you did good. He said the work was good. Same thing, coming from him. Morrison laughed, shaking his head. Damn, Kessler, you got balls. Thanks, I think. That night, back at the bunkhouse, word had spread. The crew from the East Valley had done the impossible on day 1. 53 posts in ground that should have broken them. Mara heard whispers as she walked to her bunk. Not mocking anymore. Something else. Something that might have been respect, or at least the beginning of it. She collapsed onto her mattress, every muscle screaming. Her hands had taken a beating again. The calluses helped, but new blisters formed in the spaces between the old scars. She'd need to use the salve tonight. She reached for the tin on her side table and found it wasn't there. Instead, there was a note. Small, folded once, written in handwriting that was surprisingly neat for a man who worked with his hands. Mara opened it. Supply room. After everyone's asleep. R. Her heart did that stupid thing again. She told it to stop. This wasn't whatever she thought it might be. This wasn't that. Rhett probably needed to discuss work. Strategy for the rest of the week. Something practical and professional. She lay there, watching the light fade from the windows, listening to the bunkhouse fill with the sounds of tired men settling in for the night. Some played cards. Some read. Most just collapsed into sleep. When the last light went out and the last voice faded into snoring, Mara got up. The supply room was a small shed behind the main barn, used for storing tools and equipment that needed to be locked up. Mara had never been inside it. She walked through the dark ranch yard, guided by the dim light of a half moon and the glow from distant buildings. The supply room door was slightly ajar. Light leaked out from the crack. Mara pushed it open. Rhett sat on an overturned bucket, surrounded by shelves of organized chaos, coils of wire, boxes of nails, tools in various states of repair. He had a first aid kit open beside him and was wrapping his own hand with gauze. He looked up when she entered. "Close the door." She did. The room was small enough that they were only a few feet apart. It smelled like metal and oil and something else, the particular scent of hard work that never quite washed away. "You're hurt," Mara said, nodding at his hand. "Cut it on wire." "Happens." He finished wrapping, tore the gauze with his teeth. "You need supplies." It wasn't a question. He reached behind him, pulled out a new tin of salve and a roll of bandages, held them out to her. Mara took them. Their fingers brushed. She told herself it didn't mean anything. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. Just take care of your hands. Can't work if they're infected." "Is that why you asked me here? To give me this?" Rhett stood up, and the small room got smaller. "No." He moved to one of the shelves, pulled down a rolled-up piece of paper, spread it out on a workbench. It was a map of the ranch, hand-drawn, with the fence lines marked in red. "This is where we are," he said, pointing to the East Valley. "This is what Harlan expects us to do in 3 weeks." Mara looked at the map. The amount of fence line was staggering. "That's not possible with 6 people," she said. "I know." "So what are we going to do?" Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We're going to change how we work. The old way, everyone doing their own section, individual accountability, that's not going to cut it. We need to work as a team, pairs on the hard sections, rotation on the easy ones, shared resources instead of everyone carrying their own tools. The others won't like that. Some of these guys, they're used to working alone." "I don't care what they like. I care what works." He looked at her. "I need someone I can trust to help me sell this. Someone the crew's starting to respect." "That's not me." "Yeah, it is. You just don't see it yet." Rhett rolled up the map. "Morrison looks up to you. So does Collins. Even Jake, the kid who almost quit, he asked me yesterday if you thought he was doing better. Jake barely talks to me because he's embarrassed. You called him out, and you were right. And now he's trying to prove he's not the asshole you made him feel like." Rhett set the map aside. "People listen to you, Mara. They might not want to. They might not even realize they're doing it, but they do." Mara didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent so much of her life being invisible that the idea of being seen, really seen, felt dangerous. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "And don't say it's because I'm a good worker. There are good workers all over this ranch." Rhett leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, like he was deciding how much truth to give her. "You remind me of someone," he finally said. "Who?" "My mother." Mara hadn't expected that. She was a hard woman. Had to be. My father died when I was 8, left her with 3 kids and a mortgage on a ranch that was already failing. Everyone told her to sell, move to town, get a normal job. He paused. She told them all to go to hell. Did she keep the ranch? For 15 years. Worked herself to death doing it, literally. Heart attack at 49. His voice was flat, empty of the emotion that must have been buried underneath. I was 23. Thought I knew everything. Thought I was tough. You are tough. No, I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. He looked at her. She was tough. She took every punch life threw at her and got back up. Didn't matter what people said. Didn't matter how hard it got. She just kept going. Like you, Rhett corrected. I saw you that first day. Saw Harlan laughing at you, saw the crew placing bets. And I saw you decide you didn't give a damn what any of them thought. I gave a damn, Mara said quietly. I just didn't have a choice. That's what makes it brave. The word hung in the air between them. Brave. Nobody had ever called Mara that. Desperate, maybe. Stubborn, definitely. But brave? I'm not brave, she said. I'm just tired of running. Same thing, sometimes. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, a dog barked. A truck engine turned over somewhere in the distance. I'll help you, Mara said. With the crew. With the new approach. Whatever you need. Good. Rhett pushed off from the workbench. We start tomorrow. I'll talk to them at morning briefing. You back me up. Okay. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Mara. She looked back. What I said to Harlan about you working harder than half the men here, I meant it, but it's more than that. He hesitated, like the words were difficult. You make the crew better. Make them want to work harder. I've seen crews fall apart under pressure, turn on each other. This one hasn't, and that's because of you. Mara's throat felt tight. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just keep showing up. She left the supply room and walked back through the dark, carrying bandages and salve, and something else, something fragile and terrifying, that felt almost like hope. The next morning, Rhett laid out the new plan. The crew listened, some skeptical, some openly resistant. Jake crossed his arms and shook his head. Collins looked worried. Morrison just waited to see which way the wind would blow. This is bullshit, Jake said when Rhett finished. We've always worked individual sections. That's how you know who's pulling their weight. And that's how you end up with weak spots in the line, Rhett countered. One person hits bad ground, falls behind, and the whole section suffers. This way, we cover each other. Sounds like socialism, Jake muttered. Sounds like getting the job done, Mara said. Everyone looked at her. She stepped forward, standing beside Rhett, feeling the weight of their attention like physical pressure. I know change is hard, she said. Hell, I know it better than most. But Rhett's right. We can't do this the old way. There's too much ground, too little time, and Harlan's waiting for us to fail. So what? Jake said. We're supposed to just do whatever Calder says? No. You're supposed to trust that he knows what he's doing. Same way you trust your tools. Same way you trust the posts you set will hold. She paused. He's never steered you wrong before, has he? Jake didn't answer. Nobody did. We start today, Rhett said. Pairs on the north section. Collins and Morrison, you're together. Jake and Stevens. Mara and I will take the hardest stretch. Why you and her? Jake asked. If we're working pairs, shouldn't the strongest be together? We're pairing by skill, not strength. Mara knows how to work smart. I need that. It was a good answer, a diplomatic answer, and it shut down the objections without making anyone feel weak. They got to work. Pairing with Rhett was different than working near him. The man was relentless, but up close, Mara could see the method in what looked like madness. Every movement was efficient. No wasted energy. No unnecessary steps. You're staring, Rhett said without looking up from the post he was setting. I'm learning. You already work like I do. Not quite. He glanced at her. Close enough? He tamped down the post, tested it. How'd you figure out the rhythm? Most people take months. I watched you. Every day. The way you move, the way you breathe, when you push, and when you let the tool do the work. Mara started on the next hole. You make it look easy because you're not fighting anything. You're just flowing. Flowing? Rhett almost smiled. That's a word. You know what I mean. Yeah, I do. He moved to help her with a particularly stubborn rock. Together, they levered it out of the hole. My mother used to say the same thing. Said hard work doesn't have to be violent, just persistent. They worked in silence for a while, falling into a rhythm that was better than either of them alone. When Mara's strength flagged, Rhett picked up the slack. When Rhett needed a second pair of hands, Mara was there. Around midday, Harlan showed up. He pulled up in his truck, dust billowing, and got out with the expression of a man looking for problems to justify his anger. How's it going, Calder? He called out. Rhett didn't stop working. On schedule. That right? Harlan walked along the fence line, inspecting the work with exaggerated care. He stopped at one post, wiggled it. This one's loose. No, it's not, Rhett said. I think it is. Rhett straightened, wiped sweat from his face, and walked over. He grabbed the post Harlan had been testing, gave it a hard shake. It didn't move. It's fine. Looks substandard to me. Then you don't know what you're looking at. The air went tense. The other crew members had stopped working, watching this confrontation with the wariness of people who knew violence could erupt from less. Harlan's face darkened. You want to repeat that? You heard me. Rhett's voice was flat, empty of heat or fear. This work is good, better than good, and you know it. What I know, Harlan said, stepping closer, is that you've been running your mouth ever since you decided to play hero for that. Finish that sentence, Rhett interrupted, and we're going to have a problem. Mara's heart hammered. This was her fault. Rhett was going to lose his job because he'd defended her, and now he was doubling down. And, you threatening me, Calder? I'm telling you that if you've got issues with the work, document them. Put it in writing. File a formal complaint. But don't come out here looking for excuses to throw your weight around. Harlan's hands clenched into fists. For a second, Mara thought he might actually swing, but then he seemed to remember where he was, who was watching, and what it would look like if the foreman got into a fistfight with a crew leader. You're walking a thin line, Harlan said quietly. I'm doing my job. We'll see how long that lasts. Harlan got back in his truck and drove away, faster than was safe on the rough terrain. The crew stood in silence. Then Morrison let out a low whistle. Well, he said, that was something. Get back to work, Rhett said. We're burning daylight. They got back to work. But Mara could feel the shift. Harlan wasn't going to let this go. He was going to wait, watch, and the moment they gave him an opening, he'd take it. That night, lying in her bunk, Mara couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation, kept seeing Rhett put himself between her and Harlan's anger, kept wondering why. She'd known men like Rhett before. Hard men, quiet men. Men who showed affection through action instead of words. But none of them had ever shown it to her. Maybe because she'd never earned it before. Or maybe because she'd never stayed in one place long enough for anyone to notice she was worth defending. The thought sat heavy in her chest, mixing with fear, and something else she didn't want to name. The week ground on. The crew adapted to the new system, some faster than others. Jake and Stevens worked well together once Jake stopped treating it like a competition. Collins and Morrison became an efficient machine, barely needing to communicate to coordinate their movements. And Mara and Rhett, they worked like they'd been doing it for years. By Friday, they'd completed more fence line than Harlan had expected in 2 weeks. The post stood straight and deep. The wire was taut and properly tensioned. Even Harlan, when he came for his daily inspection, couldn't find anything to criticize. He didn't look happy about it. Friday night, the ranch owner, a man named Garrett, who rarely appeared except to check the books, showed up at the work site just as the crew was finishing up. Garrett was in his 60s, weathered and wealthy. The kind of man who'd inherited land and turned it into an empire through equal parts luck and ruthlessness. He walked the fence line with Harlan trailing behind him, both of them talking in voices too low to hear. The crew waited, uncertain. Owner visits were rare and usually meant something, good or bad. Nobody knew which yet. Garrett stopped at the center of their work, looked at the fence, then at the crew. Calder, he called out. Rhett stepped forward. Sir, this your work? My crew's work. Yes, sir. Garrett nodded slowly. Harlan tells me you changed the approach. Went against standard procedure. Mara's stomach dropped. Of course, Harlan had spun it that way, made it sound like insubordination instead of innovation. We adapted to the terrain and timeline, Rhett said carefully. The results speak for themselves. They do. Garrett looked at Harlan. How far ahead of schedule are they? Harlan's jaw worked. About a week. A week? Garrett turned back to Rhett. That's impressive. What changed? Better resource allocation. Team-based approach instead of individual sections. Playing to people's strengths. Whose idea was that? Rhett hesitated for just a second. Then he said, Mine. But Kessler helped implement it. Garrett's eyes found Mara in the crew. Kessler, you're the woman Harlan wanted to cut, aren't you? Every instinct screamed at Mara to stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. But she'd spent 2 months learning to do the opposite. Yes, sir, she said. You agree with Calder's assessment about the new approach? Yes, sir. It works because it lets people support each other. Ranch work is hard enough without doing it alone. Garrett studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at Harlan. Why did you want her cut again? Harlan's face went red. I didn't think she could handle the work. Seems like she's handling it fine. Garrett turned back to the crew. Good work. All of you. Keep it up. He walked back to his truck, Harlan following like a dog that had just been swatted with a newspaper. When they were gone, the crew erupted. Did you see his face? Harlan looked like he was going to shit himself. Holy hell, I thought we were done for. Morrison clapped Mara on the shoulder. You've got guts talking to Garrett like that. I didn't say anything that wasn't true, Mara said. Still, most people wouldn't have said anything at all. Rhett had stayed quiet through the celebration. Now he caught Mara's eye, gave a small nod. Later, after the crew had gone back to the bunkhouse, Mara found Rhett still at the work site, double-checking the last section of fence. You didn't have to credit me, she said. With Garrett. That was all your plan. You made it work. That's worth credit. Still, Rhett set down his tools, faced her fully. You need to stop acting like you don't deserve recognition. You've earned your place here. Earned it twice over. Old habits, Mara said quietly. Then break them. They stood in the fading light, the fence stretching out behind them like proof of something. Not perfection, but persistence. Harlan's going to come at us harder now, Mara said. Let him. You're not worried? I'm always worried, but I'm not afraid. Rhett picked up his toolbox. Fear's what stops you, worry's what keeps you sharp. Is that something your mother used to say? No, that's something I learned the hard way. He started walking back toward the trucks. You coming? Mara followed, and as they walked through the darkening valley, she realized something had changed. She wasn't following him out of obligation or necessity. She was following because she wanted to, and that was more terrifying than anything Harlan could throw at them. The following Monday brought rain, not the gentle kind that softened the earth and made digging easier. This was the violent, angry type that turned the valley into a mud pit and made every task twice as hard. The sky opened up around 4 in the morning, and by the time the crew assembled at dawn, the worksite looked like a war zone. Rhett stood in the downpour, water streaming off his hat, studying the fence line they'd planned to work. The ground had turned to soup. Posts they'd set on Friday now leaned at drunken angles, the earth around them liquefied and useless. We can't work in this, Colin said, stating the obvious. Yes, we can, Rhett said. The posts won't hold, ground's too soft. Then we reinforce them. Rhett turned to face the crew, all of them huddled under whatever rain gear they'd managed to scavenge. We've got gravel in the supply shed. We're going to dig out each post, pour gravel in the hole for drainage, reset them deeper. It's going to take all day. It's going to be miserable. Anyone wants to sit this out, I understand. Nobody moved. Mara watched this exchange through rain that felt like needles against her skin. Her clothes were already soaked through, heavy with water that made every movement harder. But quitting wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. Let's get to it, she said. They worked through the storm like soldiers under fire. The gravel bags weighed 60 pounds each, and hauling them from the supply shed to the worksite in ankle-deep mud was its own special kind of torture. Mara's boots disappeared into the muck with every step, and pulling them free took enough effort that her thighs burned within the first hour. The rain never let up. Thunder rolled across the valley like artillery. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars, and they kept working. Digging out the posts was worse than setting them the first time. The mud sucked at the post hole digger, fighting every thrust. Mara's hands, even with the calluses she'd built up, started to blister again from the wet wood handles. Blood and rainwater mixed and dripped off her wrists. By noon, they'd reset 12 posts. They needed to do 40. Rhett moved through the crew like a ghost, appearing wherever someone was struggling, lending his strength without being asked. He pulled posts when the mud wouldn't release them, carried double loads of gravel when someone's strength gave out, worked harder than any of them, and never once complained. Mara was wrestling with a particularly stubborn post when her footing gave out. She went down hard, face first into the mud. The post fell sideways, gravel spilled everywhere. For a second, she just lay there, tasting earth and failure, wondering if this was the moment she finally broke. Then hands grabbed her arms, hauled her upright. Rhett. He didn't say anything, just pulled her to her feet, bent down and picked up the post, reset it in the hole like it weighed nothing. Pour the gravel, he said. Mara wiped mud from her eyes and poured. Together they tamped it down, tested the post. Solid. Keep moving, Rhett said, and moved on to help Morrison. The afternoon stretched into evening. The rain finally broke around 6, giving way to a sky that looked bruised and exhausted. The crew stood in the fading light, covered head to toe in mud, looking at the fence line they'd saved. 43 posts, reset and reinforced. Standing straight, despite the storm's best efforts to knock them down. Good work, Rhett said. His voice was rough, worn down by hours of shouting over thunder. Get cleaned up. Food's waiting. The crew trudged back to the bunkhouse in silence, too tired for celebration. Mara's legs felt like they were made of water. Her back had seized up sometime around hour 8, and now it screamed with every step. In the bunkhouse, she peeled off her mud-caked clothes and stood under the lukewarm shower until the water ran clear. Her hands were hamburger again, new blisters on top of old scars. The calluses had held in most places, but the wet wood had found the weak spots and exploited them ruthlessly. She dried off, put on clean clothes that felt obscene in their comfort, and sat on her bunk to assess the damage. Both palms were torn open. Her shoulders were one continuous bruise. Her knees looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to them. And tomorrow, they'd do it all again. The tin of salve sat on her side table, same as always. Mara opened it, started spreading the medicine across her palms, and tried not to think about the man who kept leaving it for her. Tried not to think about how his hands had felt on her arms when he pulled her from the mud. Tried not to think about a lot of things that were getting harder to ignore. Dinner that night was quiet. The crew ate like they were fueling up for a war, shoveling food without tasting it, drinking water by the gallon. Mara sat with Morrison and Collins, listening to them talk about nothing important. Sports, trucks, a girl Collins was seeing in town. Normal things. Human things. The kind of conversation that reminded her she was part of something now, even if she didn't quite know what to do with that. You all right, Kessler? Morrison asked. You're quiet. Just tired. Aren't we all? He took a drink of water, grimaced. That was brutal today. I thought for sure Calder would call it around lunch. Give us a break. Rhett doesn't do breaks, Collins said. Not when there's work to finish. Yeah, but we could have died out there, lightning and all. We didn't die. Could have. Mara listened to them argue, a small smile tugging at her mouth. These men, boys really, neither of them even 30, had become something like friends, or at least the closest thing to friends she'd had in years. What are you smiling about? Morrison asked. Nothing, just, this is nice. What is? This. Sitting here, eating terrible food and listening to you two bicker, Collins laughed. You got low standards, Kessler. Maybe. Or maybe I just appreciate what I've got. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. When Mara got up to leave, Morrison called after her. Hey, you did good today. With the post, most people would have stayed down. Staying down wasn't an option. Still, it was tough. You're tough. Mara nodded, not trusting herself to speak around the lump in her throat, and walked back to the bunkhouse. That night, sleep came hard and left early. Mara woke around 3 a.m, her body staging a full revolt against the abuse she'd put it through. Every muscle hurt, every joint ached, even breathing felt like work. She lay there in the dark, listening to the symphony of snores around her, and faced the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. Why was she doing this? The easy answer was survival. She needed the money, needed a place to stay, needed to prove she could still do hard things. But that wasn't the whole truth anymore. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about survival and started being about something else. About proving, not to them, but to herself, that she was more than the sum of her failures, that she could take the worst the world threw at her and not just survive it, but grow stronger because of it. And maybe, if she was being really honest, it was about the man who'd seen something in her worth defending. Mara got out of bed, pulled on her boots, and walked outside. The ranch was quiet at this hour, the only sound the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of wind through dry grass. The storm had passed, leaving behind air that smelled clean and new. She walked to the fence line, the one they'd fought so hard to save. In the moonlight, the posts stood like sentinels, keeping watch over empty land. Couldn't sleep either? Mara turned. Rhett stood a few yards away, hands in his pockets, looking at the fence. How long have you been out here? She asked. A while. He walked closer, stopped beside her. Wanted to make sure the posts held overnight. Ground's still soft. They look good. They are good. We did good work today. You did good work. We just followed your lead. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, my mother used to say something about leadership." "What's that?" "She said real leaders don't make people follow them. They make people want to stand beside them." He looked at Mara. "That's what you do. You don't follow. You stand beside. And that makes everyone else want to do the same." "I'm not a leader, Rhett. Could have fooled me." He turned back to the fence. "The crew looks to you, Morrison, Collins, even Jake. They watch how you handle things and adjust accordingly. You set the standard without saying a word. That's just surviving." "No, surviving is what you were doing when you first got here. What you're doing now, that's living." The words hit harder than they should have. Mara felt something break loose in her chest. Some piece of armor she'd been wearing so long she'd forgotten it was there. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Be part of something. Trust people. Let them—" She stopped, frustrated with herself for not having the right words. "I've spent so long alone that I don't remember how to be anything else." Rhett turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, his face looked different. Softer, maybe. Or just more honest. "You're doing fine," he said. "Am I?" "Yeah." He hesitated, then added, "And you're not alone. Not anymore." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Mara wanted to step closer, wanted to step back, wanted to do something with the feeling building in her chest like pressure before a storm. Instead, she just stood there, looking at this man who'd become the axis her world turned on, without either of them planning it. "Rhett, we should get some sleep," he said, cutting her off. Not cruelly, just carefully, like he knew where that sentence was going and wasn't ready for it. "Tomorrow's going to be another long day." "Right. Yeah." They walked back to the bunkhouse together, not speaking, the silence comfortable in a way that felt new and terrifying. At the door, Rhett paused. "Thanks," he said. "For what?" "For staying. For fighting through today. For—" He stopped, shook his head. "Just thanks." Then he was gone, walking to the foreman's cabin where he had his own small room, leaving Mara standing in the dark with her heart doing things hearts weren't supposed to do. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of brutal work and small victories. They finished the East Valley ahead of schedule, and Garrett himself came out to inspect the work. He walked the fence line with an engineer, testing posts, checking wire tension, looking for any excuse to find fault. He found none. "This is excellent work," the engineer said, making notes on his clipboard. "Better than the south line, actually. More consistent spacing, better drainage solutions." Garrett looked at Rhett. "You do this all yourself?" "No, sir. Team effort." "Your team, your credit." Garrett turned to Harlan, who'd been standing nearby looking like he'd swallowed something bitter. "I want Calder's crew on the North Ridge next. That fence has been a problem for 3 years. If anyone can fix it, it's them." "Yes, sir," Harlan said through clenched teeth. After Garrett left, Harlan pulled Rhett aside. Mara was close enough to hear. "Don't get cocky," Harlan said. "You got lucky with good weather and an easy section." "Easy?" Rhett's voice was flat. "We worked through a thunderstorm to save those posts. What part of that was easy?" "You know what I mean." "No, I really don't. You wanted us to fail. We didn't. Now you're pissed because it makes you look bad." Harlan's face went red. "Watch yourself, Calder." "Or what? You'll fire me?" "Go ahead. Garrett just gave us the North Ridge. That's the highest profile job on the ranch. You fire me now, you answer to him while you're cutting loose the crew that's been delivering ahead of schedule. There are other crew leaders. None that would have finished the East Valley in 3 weeks, and you know it." They stared at each other. Two men who'd crossed so far past professional courtesy, they were standing in open warfare territory. Finally, Harlan stepped back. "The North Ridge starts Monday. Don't screw it up." He walked away, and Mara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You're really pushing him," she said to Rhett. "He's been pushing us, pushing you." Rhett watched Harlan's truck disappear in a cloud of dust. "I'm done playing nice." "What if he finds a way to get rid of you anyway?" "Then I go, but I'm not backing down just because he's got a title." Rhett looked at her. "Besides, I'm not the one he really wants gone. You know that, right? Mara knew. Harlan's hatred of her went beyond professional disagreement. It was personal, visceral, the kind of hatred that came from having your assumptions challenged and being proven wrong in front of people whose respect you needed. What do we do? She asked. We keep doing the work, keep being better than he expects, keep proving him wrong. Rhett picked up his toolbox. And we watch our backs. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Mara was in town, a rare trip to buy supplies she couldn't get at the ranch store, when a woman approached her outside the general store. The woman was maybe 60, well-dressed in the way that marked her as someone with money and time to spend it. She had kind eyes and a smile that looked genuine. "Excuse me," the woman said. "You're Mara Kessler, aren't you?" Mara's guard went up immediately. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. Or rather, I know of you. My husband is Garrett. He owns the Broken Creek Ranch." Mara's stomach dropped. "Mrs. Garrett, I'm sorry, I should have recognized." "Don't apologize. We've never met." Mrs. Garrett shifted the shopping bag in her arms. "I wanted to talk to you, actually. Do you have a moment?" Every instinct said this was a trap, but Mara couldn't think of a polite way to refuse, so she nodded. They walked to a small park bench near the town square. Mrs. Garrett sat down with the ease of someone who'd never had to worry about whether she was welcome. "My husband talks about you," Mrs. Garrett said. "About your crew. Says you're doing remarkable work out there." "We're just doing our jobs, ma'am." "Please, call me Ellen," she smiled. "And I think you're doing more than just your jobs. James, my husband, he's been running that ranch for 30 years. He knows good work when he sees it. More importantly, he knows exceptional people." Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "He told me about the situation with Harlan," Ellen continued, "about how he tried to get rid of you, and how Rhett Calder stood up for you. It's all right. James agrees with Rhett, for what it's worth. He thinks Harlan's been letting personal biases affect his judgment." Ellen set her shopping bag down. "I wanted to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." "Okay. Are you happy there? At the ranch?" The question caught Mara off guard. Happy wasn't a word she associated with work, with survival, with the daily grind of proving she deserved to exist in spaces that didn't want her. "I don't know if happy is the right word," Mara said carefully. "Then what is?" Mara thought about it, about the fence post standing straight despite the storm, about Morrison and Collins and their easy banter, about the tin of salve that appeared like clockwork, about Rhett's quiet belief that she was more than she'd ever given herself credit for. "Purposeful," she finally said. "I feel purposeful." Ellen nodded like that made perfect sense. "That's good. That's important." She paused. "I lost my purpose once, years ago, before James and I got married. I was working a job I hated, living in a city that felt like it was crushing me. Everyone kept telling me I should be grateful. I had a good salary, a nice apartment. On paper, everything was perfect." "But it wasn't," Mara said. "No, it was misery dressed up as success." Ellen smiled. "Then I met James. He was building something out here, something hard and honest and real. And I realized I'd rather break my back doing work that mattered than sit in comfort doing work that didn't." "What did you do?" "I quit my job, moved out here, learned to keep books for the ranch, even though I'd never done accounting in my life." Ellen laughed. "Everyone thought I was crazy. My mother didn't speak to me for a year." "Was it worth it?" "Every single day." Ellen picked up her shopping bag, stood. "I'm telling you this because I see something familiar in you. That look of someone who's finally found where they're supposed to be, even if it's not where they expected." Mara stood as well. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I wanted you to know that you're welcome at Broken Creek, not just as a worker, as someone who belongs." Ellen touched Mara's arm gently. "And because I suspect Harlan is going to keep making trouble, and I want you to know that my husband sees what you're doing, values it. That should count for something if things get difficult." "Thank you," Mara said, and meant it. Ellen walked away, leaving Mara standing in the park with a strange warmth in her chest that might have been hope or might have been the terrifying realization that she'd found something worth protecting. Monday morning, the crew assembled at the North Ridge. The fence line stretched along the top of a steep incline, with views of the valley that would have been beautiful if anyone had time to appreciate them. The existing fence was a disaster. Posts rotted through, wire rusted and sagging, sections completely collapsed. "This is going to take 6 weeks," Morrison said, staring at the damage. "We've got 4, Rhett said. "Garrett wants it done before winter." "That's impossible." "Then we'll do the impossible. Again." Rhett looked at the crew. "Same system as before. Pairs, rotation, shared resources. We work smart and we work hard." They started in, and within an hour, Mara understood why this fence had been a problem for 3 years. The ground was a nightmare, rocky and uneven, with roots from nearby trees creating an underground maze. Posts couldn't go in the usual spots. Wire couldn't run straight. Every solution created a new problem. And halfway through the first day, Jake found something that made everything worse. "Hey, Calder!" he shouted. "You need to see this!" The crew gathered around where Jake stood, pointing at the ground. There, running right through where the fence line was supposed to go, was a massive crack in the earth, a fissure that looked like the result of some ancient shift in the bedrock. Rhett knelt down, examined it. His face was unreadable. "How deep is it?" Collins asked. Rhett picked up a rock, dropped it in. They counted. 5 seconds before they heard it hit bottom. "Deep enough," Rhett said. "We can't set posts over that," Morrison said. "First strong wind, the whole thing would collapse into the crack." "We rewrote the fence," Mara said. "Run it around the fissure instead of over it." "That's an extra 100 feet of fence," Jake pointed out. "More posts, more wire, more time we don't have." "You got a better idea?" Nobody did. Rhett stood, brushed dirt off his jeans. "Mara's right. We reroute. I'll talk to Garrett, get approval for the extra materials." "What about Harlan?" Morrison asked. "He's not going to like us changing the plan." "Harlan can file a complaint." Rhett pulled out his phone, started typing a message. "We do this right, or we don't do it at all." The approval came back within an hour. Garrett gave them the green light and the extra budget. But he also added a note that made everyone's stomach drop. "Harlan will be conducting daily inspections. Any deviations from approved standards must be documented and justified." "He's looking for an excuse," Collins said. "Then we don't give him one," Rhett replied. That afternoon, Harlan showed up with a clipboard and an expression that promised trouble. He walked the modified fence line, measuring spacing, checking depths, testing tension on every strand of wire they'd strung. He found nothing wrong, but he kept looking. For the next 2 weeks, Harlan became a constant presence at the work site. He'd show up at random times, sometimes early morning, sometimes late afternoon, always with his clipboard, always searching for the mistake that would justify whatever he was planning. The crew worked under that scrutiny like soldiers under sniper fire. Every movement careful, every decision second-guessed. The pressure built until the air felt thick with it. And then, on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks into the job, Harlan finally found what he was looking for. Or rather, he created it. Mara was working a section near the edge of the ridge when she heard shouting. She looked up to see Harlan standing over a post, his face triumphant. "Calder, get over here!" The crew stopped working. Rhett walked over, calm and measured, but Mara could see the tension in his shoulders. "What's the problem?" Rhett asked. "This post." Harlan kicked it. The post wobbled. "It's not secure. Substandard work." Rhett knelt down, examined the hole. Then he looked up at Harlan. "This post was fine this morning. I checked it myself." "Well, it's not fine now." "Because you loosened it." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Harlan's face went purple. "You're accusing me of sabotage?" "I'm saying this post was solid at 8 this morning when I did my inspection. Now it's loose. Either the ground gave way in the last 6 hours, which is unlikely given the weather, or someone tampered with it." "You're out of line, Calder." "Am I?" Rhett stood. "Because if this is about finding problems with our work, you could have just asked. I would have walked you through every post, every wire, every decision, but you didn't want transparency. You wanted ammunition. I want this fence built to standard, and clearly your crew can't. My crew is the best on this ranch, and you know it." Rhett's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. "We've delivered ahead of schedule, under budget, and above standard on every job. The only problem here is you." Harlan stepped closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. "You finished? Not even close. You've been harassing this crew for weeks, showing up at random times, Nitpicking work that passes every inspection, making people nervous about doing their jobs. That stops now. Or what? Or I go to Garrett, show him the documented inspection reports that prove our work is solid. Show him the timeline of your visits and your complaints. Let him decide if you're doing your job or abusing your position. Mara's heart hammered. This was it. The confrontation they'd all been waiting for, and it was happening in front of the whole crew, which meant there was no taking it back. Harlan looked around at the watching faces, saw no support there, and his expression turned ugly. "You're making a mistake, Calder. I'm drawing a line. There's a difference." Harlan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a truck pulled up. Garrett's truck. Everyone froze. Garrett got out, took in the scene, the confrontation, the crew standing witness, the loose post at the center of it all. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" he asked. Silence. Then Mara stepped forward. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it, just moved. "There's been a disagreement about the quality of our work," she said. "Harlan found a post that was loose. Rhett's pointing out that it wasn't loose this morning." Garrett looked at her, then at the post. "Show me." They walked him through it. The morning inspection log that Rhett kept meticulously, the photos he took of completed sections, the timeline of Harlan's visits. Garrett listened to everything, his face giving nothing away. When they finished, he knelt down and examined the post himself. Then he stood and looked at Harlan. "This post was tampered with," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's ridiculous," Harlan blustered. "I found it like this." "No, you didn't." Garrett pointed to the ground around the post. "See these marks? That's from a post being worked loose deliberately. The earth's been disturbed recently, within the last few hours. If the ground had naturally settled, there would be uniform compression. This is manual." Harlan's face went white. "I've been getting reports," Garrett continued, "about your conduct with this crew. Multiple visits, excessive scrutiny, personal comments." He looked at Mara, particularly toward Ms. Kessler here. "I was doing my job. Your job is to manage workflow and maintain standards, not to create problems where none exist." Garrett's voice was cold. "You're suspended, effective immediately. 2 weeks, no pay. During that time, I'll be conducting a review of your performance. If I find evidence of the harassment I suspect, it'll be permanent." "You can't. I own this ranch. I can do whatever I want." Garrett turned to Rhett. "You're acting foreman while Harlan's suspended. Think you can handle it?" Rhett glanced at Mara, then back at Garrett. "Yes, sir." "Good. Finish this fence. Do it right. Make me proud." Garrett got back in his truck and drove away, leaving Harlan standing there with his career in ruins and nothing but his own hatred to blame. Harlan looked at Rhett, then at Mara. His eyes promised that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Then he got in his own truck and left, tires spitting gravel like bullets. The crew stood in stunned silence. Then Morrison let out a whoop that echoed across the valley. "Did that really just happen?" Collins asked. "Yeah," Rhett said quietly. "It really did." They celebrated that night, not with alcohol or loud parties, but with the quiet satisfaction of people who'd survived something that should have destroyed them. The crew ate together, talking and laughing, the tension of the last weeks finally breaking. Mara sat with them, part of the circle now instead of outside it, and felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. She felt like she belonged. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, she found Rhett sitting outside, looking at the stars. "You should be celebrating," she said, sitting beside him. "I am, just quietly." "You're acting foreman now. That's a big deal." "It's temporary. Once Harlan's review is done, you think Garrett's keeping him on after this?" Rhett was quiet. "No, probably not." "So you'll be permanent foreman?" "Maybe, if I want it." "Do you?" He thought about that. "I don't know. It's more politics, more paperwork, less actual work. But more influence, more ability to protect your crew." "Yeah." He looked at her. "You were brave today, stepping up like that." "I was terrified." Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching, neither of them willing to close that last inch of distance. "Rhett," Mara said, "thank you for everything. For defending me, for teaching me, for—" "Don't," he said gently. "You don't owe me thanks. You earned everything you got here." Still. He turned to face her fully, and in the starlight, she could see something in his expression that made her breath catch. Mara, I need to tell you something. Her heart hammered. Okay. But before he could speak, Morrison burst out of the bunkhouse, shouting, Calder, we got a problem. One of the supply trucks just went off the road near the South Pass. The moment shattered. Rhett stood immediately, switching into crisis mode. Anyone hurt? Don't know yet. Dispatch is asking for help. Get the crew. We're going. They spent the next 4 hours helping pull the truck out of a ditch and salvaging what they could of the supplies. By the time they got back, exhausted and filthy, the moment was gone. Whatever Rhett had been about to say remained unspoken. And Mara lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd just lost something important before she even knew she had it. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a knife's edge. Rhett stepped into the Foreman role like he'd been preparing for it his whole life. And in a way, maybe he had. He ran things differently than Harlan. Less micromanagement, more trust. He gave the crews autonomy and held them accountable for results instead of hovering over every decision. The ranch responded. Production went up. Morale improved. Even the crews that hadn't worked under Rhett started requesting transfers to his supervision. But with success came visibility, and with visibility came complications. Mara felt the change first in small ways. The other workers treated her differently now, not quite as an equal but not as a curiosity either. Something in between. They asked her opinion on work problems, invited her to their card games, stopped talking around her like she was temporary. It should have felt good. It did feel good mostly, but it also felt precarious, like standing on ice that could crack at any moment. The thing neither she nor Rhett talked about was the moment that had been interrupted. Whatever he'd been about to say that night under the stars remained unsaid, and the space between them filled with a tension that made working together both easier and harder. Easier because they'd developed a rhythm so natural it felt like breathing. Harder because every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment of quiet understanding reminded Mara of what might be building between them and how terrifying that was. She was 43 years old. She'd learned not to hope for things she couldn't control. And whatever this was with Rhett, it felt like the most uncontrollable thing she'd ever encountered. 3 weeks into Rhett's tenure as acting foreman, a man showed up at the ranch in a truck too clean and clothes too new. He found Mara during her lunch break, sitting in the shade of a water truck with Morrison and Collins. "Excuse me," the man said. "I'm looking for Mara Kessler." Mara's guard went up immediately. "That's me." The man smiled. He had perfect teeth and a handshake that probably closed deals. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I work for Western Agricultural Services. We're a labor management company that contracts with ranches across 3 states. "Okay," Mara said slowly. "I've been hearing about the work you're doing here. The innovations your crew implemented, the efficiency improvements, the ahead-of-schedule completions." He pulled out a business card, held it out to her. "I'd like to talk to you about a job." Morrison and Collins had gone very quiet. Mara took the card, studied it. It looked official, expensive. "What kind of job?" she asked. "We're opening a new training facility in Colorado. We need someone to run our efficiency program, teaching crews how to work smarter, implement team-based approaches, that kind of thing." He leaned against the truck, casual and confident. "The position comes with a salary, benefits, housing. A real career, not just day labor." "I have a job." "I understand, but this is different. This is advancement, leadership, a chance to make a real impact on the industry." He paused. "And it pays twice what you're making here." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Twice what she was making. A salary instead of hourly wages. Benefits. Housing that wasn't a narrow bunk in a room full of snoring men. Everything she'd dreamed of when she was sleeping on couches and eating gas station sandwiches. "I need to think about it," Mara said. "Of course. Take your time." Daniel straightened, adjusted his too-clean shirt. "But I should mention, we need someone by the end of the month. So if you're interested, I'll need to know soon." He walked away, leaving Mara holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Morrison whistled low. "Damn, Kessler, that's a hell of an offer." "Yeah," Mara said. "You gonna take it?" "I don't know." Collins leaned forward. "What's there to think about? That's a real job. Career advancement. You'd be crazy not to take it." "Maybe." But even as she said it, Mara felt something heavy settle in her chest. This should be easy. This should be the obvious choice. Take the money, the security, the chance to build something that looked like a future. So why did it feel like she'd be losing something more important? Word spread fast. By dinner, the whole crew knew about the offer. Some congratulated her. Others looked betrayed, like she was abandoning ship. Morrison didn't talk to her at all, just ate his meal in silence and left early. Rhett didn't show up to dinner. Mara found that absence louder than any conversation. That night, she lay in her bunk, turning the business card over and over in her hands. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. She'd be a fool to stay at a ranch doing backbreaking labor when she could have an office job teaching others how to do it. But foolish and safe had never described Mara Kessler. Around midnight, unable to sleep, she got up and walked to the supply shed. It had become a habit. When she couldn't sort through her thoughts, she went to the place where Rhett had first trusted her with something real. He was there. Of course he was. He sat on the same overturned bucket, looking at papers spread across the workbench. Budget reports, probably. Schedule projections, the administrative work that came with being foreman. "Can't sleep either?" Mara asked from the doorway. Rhett looked up. At the dim light, his face was hard to read. "Heard about your offer. News travels fast." "Small ranch, she." He set down his pen. "You gonna take it?" "I don't know. Should I?" "That's not my call to make." "But if it was?" Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It's a good opportunity. Career advancement, security, everything you deserve." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you." He stood, faced her fully. "I can't tell you to stay, Mara. That wouldn't be fair to you." "Why not?" "Because you'd stay for the wrong reasons." "What are the wrong reasons?" He looked at her like she was asking him to jump off a cliff. "You know what they are." The air between them went electric. All the unspoken things, all the careful distance they'd maintained suddenly felt like tissue paper. "Say it," Mara said quietly. "No." "Why not?" "Because if I say it, it becomes real. And if it's real, you can't make this decision clearly." Rhett ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You need to choose based on what's best for you, not based on what? On feelings that might not last, on a connection that might just be proximity and shared hardship." His voice was rough. "You deserve better than to throw away a real opportunity because of something that might not even be what we think it is." Mara felt something crack in her chest. "You think this is just proximity?" "I don't know what this is. That's the problem." "Then maybe we should figure it out." "Not like this. Not when you've got a major life decision hanging over it." Rhett picked up his papers, started organizing them with movements that were too precise, too controlled. "Take the job, Mara. Go to Colorado. Build something real." "And what if what I'm building is here? Then you'll come back. Or you won't. Either way, you'll know you made the choice for yourself, not for me." He walked past her toward the door. Mara caught his arm. "Rhett, don't." He stopped but didn't turn around. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone in the supply shed with her thoughts and a business card that promised everything except the one thing she'd realized she wanted most. The next few days were agony. Mara went through the motions of work, but her heart wasn't in it. The crew noticed. Morrison finally broke his silence to ask if she was okay. Collins kept shooting her worried glances. Even Jake, who'd never been particularly perceptive, asked if something was wrong. Rhett maintained professional distance. He spoke to her about work, gave her assignments, checked her sections. But the easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by careful politeness that hurt more than anger would have. On Thursday, Daniel Reeves called, the number on the business card. "Have you made a decision?" he asked. "I need a few more days," Mara said. "I can give you until Monday, but that's the deadline. After that, we'll need to move on to other candidates." Monday. 3 days to decide the rest of her life. That night, Ellen Garrett showed up at the ranch. She found Mara after dinner, sitting alone on the bunkhouse steps. "Mind if I join you?" Ellen asked. "It's your ranch." "It's my husband's ranch. I'm just the woman who keeps the books." She sat down, arranged her skirt carefully. "I heard about your job offer." "Does everyone know?" "It's a small community. People talk." Ellen looked out at the valley, painted gold by the setting sun. "Are you going to take it?" Everyone seems to think I should. I didn't ask what everyone thinks. I asked what you're going to do. Mara sighed. I don't know. The smart choice is obvious. The money, the security, the advancement. It's everything I should want. But it doesn't feel right. And I don't know if that's my gut telling me something important or just fear of change. Ellen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I tell you something about the day I decided to leave my job in the city and move here? Okay. My mother told me I was being stupid, said I was throwing away everything I'd worked for, a good salary, a nice apartment, a career with a future. Ellen smiled. She wasn't wrong. On paper, it was a terrible decision. What changed your mind? James asked me something. He said, In 5 years, which choice will you regret more? The one where you stayed safe or the one where you took a risk? Ellen looked at Mara. And I realized that I could live with failure if I tried. But I couldn't live with wondering what if. This feels different, though. This isn't about taking a risk. This is about choosing between two good options. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're choosing between the safe path and the one that scares you. The Colorado job scares me too. Not in the same way. Ellen stood, brushed dust from her skirt. The Colorado job scares you because it's new and unknown, but staying here scares you because it means admitting you've found something worth protecting. And in my experience, the second kind of fear is the one worth paying attention to. She left Mara sitting there as the sun dropped below the horizon and the stars came out one by one, each one a point of light in a darkness that suddenly felt less empty. Friday morning, Mara found Morrison working alone on a section of fence near the eastern boundary. She grabbed her tools and joined him without asking. They worked in silence for a while. Then Morrison said, You're really leaving, aren't you? I haven't decided yet. But you're thinking about it hard enough that it might as well be decided. Mara set down her post-hole digger. Would you take the job, if you were me? Morrison was quiet, thinking it through with the seriousness he applied to everything that mattered. Probably, yeah, it's a good opportunity. But I'm not you. He tested a post, adjusted it slightly. You came here with nothing, no friends, no respect, nothing but the clothes on your back and the will to not quit. And you built something, not just work credentials, though you got those too. You built a place for yourself. I could build that in Colorado. Could you? Or would you be the efficiency expert, the teacher, the person who knows how things should be done but doesn't get her hands dirty anymore? He looked at her. You going to be happy in an office, Kessler, teaching people from a manual instead of showing them in the dirt? It's not like that. Isn't it? Mara didn't have an answer. Morrison went back to work. After a few minutes, he said, Whatever you decide, I get it. Just make sure you're deciding for yourself, not because of what other people think you should do. What about Rhett? The question slipped out before Mara could stop it. Morrison smiled. What about him? He thinks I should take the job. No, he thinks he shouldn't be the reason you don't take the job. There's a difference. Morrison pulled another post from the pile. Calder's a good man, but he's got this thing where he thinks he doesn't deserve good things. Like he's got to earn the right to be happy. So he pushes away anything that looks like it might matter to him. How do you know that? Because I've worked with him for 3 years. Because I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching. Because I've never seen him put himself on the line for anyone the way he did for you. Morrison set the post in position. He cares about you. Anyone with eyes can see it, but he's too scared to say it because he thinks you'll make a decision based on him instead of based on you. That's stupid. Yeah, but it's also kind of noble, in a self-destructive way. They worked through the rest of the morning, and when lunch came, Mara sat with the crew and listened to them talk about nothing important and realized how much she'd miss this if she left. The easy camaraderie, the shared exhaustion, the way they'd gone from betting on her failure to including her in their stupid jokes and their serious conversations. Saturday, Garrett called Rhett into his office for a meeting. When Rhett came out an hour later, his face was carefully neutral. He found Mara working on supply inventory, a task she'd volunteered for because it kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. We need to talk, Rhett said. Mara's stomach dropped. Okay. They walked to a quiet spot away from the main buildings, near an old equipment shed that nobody used anymore. The sun was high and hot, but there was shade here, and privacy. Garrett made Harlan's suspension permanent, Rhett said. He's fired, effective immediately. That's good, right? Yeah, it is. Rhett leaned against the shed wall. He offered me the foreman position. Permanent, full salary, benefits, the works. Rhett, that's amazing. You deserve it. I turned it down. Mara's breath caught. What? Why? Because I don't want to be foreman. I want to do the work, not manage people doing the work. He looked at her. And because I realized something. I've been making decisions based on what I think I should want instead of what I actually want. I don't understand. I told you to take the Colorado job because it seemed like the right thing to say. The noble thing. The thing that proved I wasn't trying to manipulate you into staying. He pushed off from the wall. But that was bullshit. I was protecting myself. If I told you to go and you went, then I never had to risk anything. Never had to admit that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about work and started being about something else. Mara's heart hammered. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want you to go. I'm saying that these last few months working with you have been the best months I've had in years. I'm saying that when I think about you leaving, it feels like losing something I didn't even know I was looking for. He stepped closer. But I'm also saying that if Colorado is what you want, if that job is the right choice for your life, then I'll support that. I'll miss you like hell, but I'll support it. And if I don't know what I want, then maybe we figure it out together. The air between them felt charged, heavy with 4 months of unspoken words and careful distance finally collapsing. I'm scared, Mara said quietly. Of what? Of this. Of choosing something because it feels right instead of because it makes sense on paper. Of trusting that this, whatever this is between us, is real and not just convenience or proximity or loneliness. I'm scared too, Rhett admitted. I'm scared of asking you to give up an opportunity for something that might not work. I'm scared of not being enough. I'm scared of a lot of things. But I'm more scared of not trying, of watching you leave and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. He reached out, took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses that matched her own. So I'm asking, not telling you what to do, not trying to make the decision for you, just asking, will you stay? Mara looked at their joined hands, thought about the business card in her pocket, thought about the safe choice and the smart choice, and all the reasons she should take the Colorado job. Then she thought about Morrison's words, about Ellen's question, about which choice she'd regret more in 5 years. I need to make a phone call, she said. Sunday morning, Mara called Daniel Reeves. I appreciate the offer, she told him, but I'm going to have to decline. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? This is a significant opportunity. I know, and I'm grateful you thought of me, but I found something here that matters more than advancement. And what's that? Mara looked out the window at the valley, at the fence line she'd helped build, at the ranch that had become the first place in years that felt like home. Purpose, she said, and people worth staying for. After she hung up, she sat on her bunk feeling the weight of the decision settle over her. She'd just turned down security and safety and everything she thought she wanted, and she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Morrison found her an hour later, sitting outside in the sun. Heard you made your call, he said. News really does travel fast here. So you're staying? Yeah, I'm staying. Morrison grinned. Good. Crew wouldn't be the same without you. He paused. Calder know yet? Not yet. You should tell him. Man's been walking around looking like someone kicked his dog. Mara found Red at the North Ridge, inspecting the fence they'd finished the week before. He stood with his back to her, one hand on a post, looking out at the valley spread below. It's holding well, Mara said. Rhett turned. When he saw her, something in his expression shifted. Yeah, good work. We did good work. All of us. Yeah. He waited, and she could see the question in his eyes, the hope he was trying not to show. I called Daniel Reeves this morning, Mara said. Rhett's face went carefully neutral. And? I turned down the job. For a moment, Rhett didn't move. Then he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. When he set her down, his eyes were bright. You're sure? You're not going to regret this? I might, but I'd regret leaving more. She looked up at him. Besides, someone told me recently that fear is what keeps you sharp, and I'm feeling pretty damn sharp right now. Rhett laughed, an actual laugh, something Mara had rarely heard from him. That someone sounds pretty smart. He has his moments. They stood there, close enough that Mara could see the silver threads in Rhett's hair, the lines around his eyes, all the small details that marked him as real and flawed and human. So what happens now? She asked. Now we get back to work, finish the season, build more fence. He paused. And maybe when the work's done, we figure out what this is between us. Sounds good. Yeah? Yeah. Rhett smiled and it transformed his whole face. Good. Because I've got plans for us, Kessler. Big plans. Is that right? Yeah, first we're going to finish this ridge. Then we're going to tackle that disaster of a fence by the western boundary. And somewhere in there, I'm going to take you into town for a real meal. One you don't have to cook yourself. That a date, Calder? That's a promise. They walked back toward the ranch together, shoulders bumping, comfortable in the silence that had become their language. And for the first time since arriving at Broken Creek Ranch, Mara felt like she wasn't running from something. She was running toward it. Whatever came next, the hard work, the uncertainty, the risk of building something with another person, she was ready. Because she'd finally found something worth the fear. The news of Mara's decision to stay spread through the ranch like wildfire, but the reaction wasn't what she expected. Some were happy. Morrison clapped her on the back. Collins bought her a beer in town. Even Jake nodded his approval. But others looked at her differently now, like they were trying to figure out what she knew that they didn't. Because the truth was, Mara had turned down everything that was supposed to matter: money, advancement, security, for something that couldn't be quantified on a resume or deposited in a bank account. She'd chosen to stay for the hardest reason of all, because this place, these people, this work, they'd made her feel like herself again, like the version of herself she'd lost somewhere between failed jobs and broken promises and years of being told she wasn't enough. The week after her decision, Garrett called a meeting with all the crew leaders. Rhett was there, along with the heads of the other teams, men who'd been running their crews for years and didn't particularly like the changes Rhett had implemented. Mara wasn't invited, but she heard about it afterward from Morrison, who had a talent for being in the right place to overhear important conversations. Garrett's making Rhett permanent foreman, Morrison told her, not asking, telling. Said Rhett can decline, but then he's bringing in someone from outside the ranch to run operations. Rhett won't like that, Mara said. No, but he's going to do it anyway. Heard him tell Garrett he'd take the position on one condition. What condition? Morrison grinned. That you get promoted to crew leader, your own team, your own assignments, full crew leader pay. Mara's stomach dropped. He can't do that. I've only been here 5 months. That's what the other crew leaders said. Told Garrett it wasn't fair, wasn't earned, wasn't how things worked. Morrison's grin widened. You know what Garrett said? What? He said that if 5 months of work from you is worth more than 5 years from someone else, then maybe the problem isn't you. It's the system that would overlook you. The promotion came through 3 days later. Mara found out when Garrett himself walked up to her work site and handed her a new badge that said Crew Leader, South Operations. You've earned this, Garrett said. Don't let anyone tell you different. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you've been doing, making my ranch better. He paused. And keep Calder in line. He listens to you more than he listens to me. After Garrett left, Mara stood holding the badge, feeling the weight of it, both literal and metaphorical. This was real. This was a future. Not the one she'd planned, but maybe the one she'd needed all along. Rhett found her that evening, sitting on the fence they'd built together, watching the sun set over the valley. Heard you got the news, he said, climbing up to sit beside her. Yeah, thank you for pushing for it. I didn't push. I just told Garrett the truth, that you're one of the best workers on this ranch, and if he wanted to keep you, he needed to recognize that. Still, you didn't have to. Rhett was quiet for a moment, then he said, When I took this foreman job, I made myself a promise that I'd build something different here, not based on who'd been around longest or who kissed the most ass, based on who did the work and did it right. That's a good promise. It's also a hard one, because change pisses people off. He looked at her. You ready for that? The pushback, the resentment, the people who'll say you only got this because of me? Let them say it. I know the truth, which is that I earned this. Every post, every blister, every day I showed up when everyone expected me to quit. Mara jumped down from the fence. And if someone has a problem with that, they can take it up with my crew, once I have one. Rhett smiled. That's the spirit. He climbed down too, stood close enough that she could see the fading light reflected in his eyes. So about that dinner I promised you. When? Friday night. There's a place in town. Nothing fancy, but the food's good and they don't water down the whiskey. Sounds perfect. It's a date then. Yeah, Mara said softly. It is. The next challenge came faster than expected. On Monday morning, Mara assembled her new crew, a mix of workers from different teams, some she knew, some she didn't. 6 men, all of them younger and stronger than her, all of them looking at her with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Morning, Mara said. I'm Mara Kessler. I'm your new crew leader. One of them, a stocky guy named Travis with arms like tree trunks, crossed his arms. Yeah, we heard. Question is, what makes you qualified to lead us? 5 months of working harder than most people work in 5 years. 5 months of learning from the best crew leader on this ranch. 5 months of proving I deserve to be here. That's not an answer. Then let me give you a better one. I'm qualified because Garrett and Rhett trust me to do this job. And if you don't like it, you can request a transfer. But if you stay on my crew, you follow my lead, just like you'd follow any other crew leader. Travis stared at her, jaw working. Then he looked at the others, saw no support for a mutiny, and finally nodded. All right, what's the assignment? The western boundary fence. 2 miles of line that hasn't been maintained in 3 years. We've got 4 weeks to get it operational. One of the younger guys, barely 20, with a sunburn that suggested he was new to outdoor work, raised his hand. That's a lot of fence for 6 people. It is. Which is why we're not going to work the way you're used to working. We're doing this as a team. Pairs on the hard sections, rotation on the easy ones. Everyone supports everyone. Questions? Yeah, Travis said. You ever actually led a crew before? Or is this your first time? First time as crew leader. But I've been working teams for months, and I learned from the best. Mara picked up her post-hole digger. Now let's get to work. We're burning daylight. They got to work, and within the first hour, Mara understood why this crew had been assembled for her. They were the problem cases. The workers who didn't play well with others, who complained about assignments, who did the minimum required and not an ounce more. Garrett and Rhett had given her the crew nobody else wanted. A test, maybe. Or a vote of confidence that she could handle the hard cases. Either way, Mara wasn't going to fail. She worked alongside them, not above them. When Travis struggled with a particularly stubborn post, she grabbed the other side and helped him lever it out. When the young kid, his name was Danny, cut his hand on wire, she cleaned and bandaged it herself. When another worker named Cruz started slacking off, she didn't yell. She just quietly reassigned him to a harder section until he decided working with the team was easier than working alone. By the end of the first day, they'd made decent progress. Not great, but decent. More importantly, the hostility had faded into wary respect. You did good today, Travis said as they packed up tools. Better than I expected. Thanks, I think. No, I mean it. We've had crew leaders who just bark orders and disappear. You actually work. He hefted his toolbox. I still don't think you earned this position, but maybe I'll give you a chance to prove me wrong. That's all I'm asking for, Mara said. That night at dinner, Rhett sat with her, something he hadn't done since the promotion, probably trying to avoid the appearance of favoritism. How'd it go? He asked. Hard, but good. Mara picked at her food. They don't trust me yet. They will. Give them time. What if I can't do this? What if I'm a good worker, but a bad leader? Rhett set down his fork, looked at her seriously. You know what makes someone a good leader? It's not being the strongest or the smartest or the most experienced. It's giving a damn. Caring about the work and the people doing it, and you've got that in spades. How do you know? Because I've watched you for 5 months. I've seen how you help Morrison when he's struggling, how you encouraged Jake when he wanted to quit, how you made the whole crew better just by being part of it. He paused. That's not something you can teach. That's who you are. Mara felt her throat tighten. What if who I am isn't enough? Then you'll fail, and then you'll get up and try again, same as you've been doing your whole life. Rhett reached across the table, covered her hand with his. But I don't think you're going to fail. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Mara saw heads turn, saw whispers start. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the foreman and the new crew leader were something, whatever this was. People are staring, Mara said quietly. Let them stare. This is going to make things harder for both of us. Probably. But I'm done hiding how I feel because it might be inconvenient. Rhett squeezed her hand, then let go. Besides, Friday's coming. Let them talk. I don't care. Friday came, and with it, nerves Mara hadn't felt in decades. She showered, put on the one nice shirt she owned, a blue button-down she'd been saving for job interviews she never got, and stood in front of the bunkhouse mirror trying to remember the last time she'd been on an actual date. College, maybe. Before everything fell apart. You clean up nice, Kessler, Morrison said from his bunk. Calder's a lucky man. We're just getting dinner. Right, just dinner. With the guy who put his job on the line for you. Twice. Morrison grinned. Have fun on your just dinner. Rhett picked her up in his truck. A beat-up Ford that had seen better decades but ran like it was new. He'd cleaned up too, wearing jeans without holes and a shirt that looked like it had been ironed. You look nice, Mara said, climbing in. So do you. He pulled out of the ranch yard, headed toward town. Fair warning, this place I'm taking you isn't fancy, but the owner's a friend, and he makes the best steak you've ever had. I don't need fancy. Good, because I don't do fancy. The restaurant was called the Copper Bell, tucked into a side street in town that Mara had never noticed. Inside it was dim and warm, with wooden tables and a bar that looked like it had been there since before Mara was born. The owner, a man with gray hair and a handshake like a vice, greeted Rhett like family. Calder, been too long. And who's this? This is Mara. Mara, this is Bill. He owns the place. Nice to meet you, Mara said. Bill studied her with the kind of look that saw more than it should. So you're the woman who's got my boy here walking around with a smile on his face. About damn time. Bill, Rhett started. What? I'm just saying, you've been coming here for 6 years looking like someone stole your dog. Now you look like you found it again. Bill clapped Rhett on the shoulder. Come on. I saved you the good table. They sat in a corner booth with a view of the street. Bill brought them whiskey without asking, then disappeared to let them talk. He seems nice, Mara said. He's a pain in the ass, but yeah, he's good people. Rhett took a sip of his drink. He knew my mother, used to give her free meals when things were tight. You really loved her, didn't you? Your mother. She was the strongest person I ever met. Worked herself to death trying to keep that ranch, and never once complained, never once asked for help. Rhett's voice was quiet. I used to think that was strength. Now I think maybe it was just stubbornness. What changed? I met someone who showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, that letting people in isn't failure. He looked at her, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you can't do it alone. Mara felt her chest tighten. I'm not that strong. Yes, you are. You just don't see it yet. Dinner came. Steaks that were as good as promised, cooked perfectly and served with potatoes that tasted like comfort food should. They ate and talked. And for the first time in longer than Mara could remember, she felt normal. Not like a woman fighting to prove she deserved to exist. Just like a person, sitting with another person, sharing a meal and conversation. Can I ask you something? Rhett said over coffee. Sure. What made you come to Broken Creek? What were you running from? Mara wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. Everything. I'd been fired from my last 3 jobs. Nothing dramatic, just companies downsizing or deciding they could get someone younger and cheaper. I was living with my sister, sleeping on her couch, listening to her husband complain about how long I was staying. That sounds rough. It was. But the worst part was the way they looked at me. Like I was broken. Like I'd given up. She took a sip of coffee. So one day I just left. Took what little money I had, bought a bus ticket west, and kept going until the money ran out. And it ran out at Broken Creek. Near enough. I was sleeping in a motel parking lot when I saw the ad for ranch workers. Figured I had nothing to lose. She smiled. Turns out I had everything to gain. I'm glad you came here. Me too. They talked until the restaurant closed, until Bill kicked them out with a knowing smile and a reminder to come back soon. Then they sat in Rhett's truck in the dark parking lot, neither one ready for the night to end. "Thank you," Mara said, "for dinner, for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "I know, but I want to." Rhett turned to face her, and in the dim light from the street lamps, his expression was open in a way she'd never seen. "Mara, I need to tell you something." "Okay. When you first showed up at the ranch, I thought you'd be gone in a week. Everyone did. You were this woman who clearly didn't belong, who couldn't possibly handle the work." He paused. "And then you didn't quit. Day after day you showed up. You bled, you hurt, you struggled, but you didn't quit." "I couldn't afford to quit." "It was more than that. You could have found another job, another place, but you stayed, and somewhere along the way I stopped seeing you as just another worker." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I started seeing you as the person who made me believe in things again, in people, in the possibility that maybe life could be more than just surviving." Mara's breath caught. "Rhett." "I'm in love with you," he said. Simple, direct. "I have been for a while now. And I know it's complicated. I know we work together and people will talk and it might make things harder, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way." For a moment, Mara couldn't speak. All the walls she'd built, all the defenses she'd maintained crumbled in the face of his honesty. "I'm scared," she finally said. "Of what?" "Of this. Of trusting it. Of believing that someone could actually want me, not in spite of who I am, but because of it. I do want you. All of you. The stubborn parts and the scared parts and the parts that refuse to quit even when quitting makes sense." He took her hand. "And I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of not trying." Mara looked at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused from years of hard work, hers the same. Two people who'd been broken by life and put themselves back together in the only way they knew how, through persistence and pain and refusing to stay down. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it." Rhett smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Not scared anymore?" "Terrified. But doing it anyway." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. And maybe she was. But maybe being precious didn't mean being fragile. Maybe it just meant being valued. When they pulled apart, Mara was crying. Not sad tears, the other kind. The kind that came when something inside you finally healed. "You okay?" Rhett asked. "Yeah, better than okay." She wiped her eyes. "Can we just sit here for a minute? I want to remember this." "We can sit here as long as you want." They sat in the truck until the streetlights started to go off, until the town rolled up for the night, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the future that were both terrifying and exhilarating. A future that looked nothing like what Mara had imagined when she first arrived at Broken Creek Ranch, with nothing but desperation and a refusal to quit. The following Monday brought the kind of challenge that made Mara wonder if the universe was testing her newfound happiness. Her crew showed up to the western boundary to find that someone had vandalized their work site overnight. Posts pulled out, wire cut, tools scattered and broken. "What the hell?" Travis said, staring at the destruction. Mara's stomach sank. This was deliberate, targeted. Someone had wanted to sabotage her crew. "Who would do this?" Danny asked. "Someone who doesn't want me to succeed," Mara said quietly. "Someone who thinks I don't deserve this position." She found Rhett at the main office, going over schedules. When she told him what happened, his face went dark. "I'll talk to Garrett. Get security footage from the ranch cameras." "This is because of me. Because they think I'm getting special treatment." "No, this is because some asshole can't handle change." Rhett stood. "We'll find out who did this." They did. The security footage showed 3 workers, men from other crews who'd been vocal about their disapproval of Mara's promotion, sneaking to the worksite after midnight. Garrett fired all 3 on the spot. "I don't tolerate this kind of behavior," Garrett told the assembled crews the next morning. "You don't like who's in charge. File a complaint. Transfer to another crew. But you do not sabotage the work. You do not destroy property. And you do not bully people because you disagree with my decisions." He looked directly at Mara. Ms. Kessler earned her position through hard work and dedication. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Or they can pack their bags and find work elsewhere. Are we clear? A chorus of "Yes, sir" echoed across the yard. After the meeting, Travis approached Mara. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About those guys. About what they did. You didn't do it. No, but I thought it, at first, when you got promoted. He shifted uncomfortably. I was wrong. You've proven yourself 10 times over, and anyone who can't see that is an idiot. Thank you, Mara said. That means something. Yeah, well, don't let it go to your head. He smiled. Come on, we've got a fence to rebuild. They rebuilt it. In 3 days, working longer hours, refusing to let the sabotage slow them down. And when they were done, the fence stood stronger than before, a testament to what people could accomplish when they decided to work together instead of against each other. The weeks turned into months. Fall came to the valley, painting the landscape in colors that made the hard work feel almost worthwhile. Mara's crew finished the western boundary ahead of schedule, then moved on to the next project and the next. She was good at this, leading people, solving problems, making decisions that balanced efficiency with compassion. The crew that had started skeptical became loyal, defending her to anyone who questioned her authority. And her relationship with Rhett deepened in the quiet spaces between work. They didn't broadcast it, but they didn't hide it either. They ate meals together, sat together at crew meetings, spent evenings planning the ranch's future. People talked, of course, but the talk shifted from skepticism to acceptance, and eventually to something that looked almost like approval. Because Mara and Rhett worked. They challenged each other, supported each other, made each other better at their jobs and at being human. One evening in late October, Mara stood at the fence line she'd worked on her first day, the place where she'd nearly broken, where Rhett had left her the salve, where everything had started to change. The fence stood straight and strong, wire gleaming in the sunset. She'd helped build this, had bled for it, had proven herself worthy of a place in a world that had told her she didn't belong. Admiring your handiwork? Rhett's voice came from behind her. She turned. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression that still made her heart do stupid things. Just remembering, she said. Remembering what? How far I've come. How different everything is now. Rhett walked closer. Better? So much better. She leaned against the fence. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, that I get to do this work, lead this crew, be with you. Believe it. You earned all of it. Did I? Or did I just get lucky? There's no such thing as luck. There's just showing up and refusing to quit when things get hard. He stood beside her, their shoulders touching. You did that. Every day for 6 months you showed up. That's not luck. That's character. Mara thought about that, about the woman who'd arrived here with nothing, who'd been mocked and dismissed and counted out, about how she'd taken every punch and kept standing. I used to think I was weak, she said quietly, because I'd failed so many times, lost so many jobs, ended up sleeping on couches and in parking lots. And now? Now I think maybe I was just looking for the right place to be strong. That's wisdom right there. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun dropped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called. Somewhere else the ranch settled in for the night. Marry me, Rhett said. Mara's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not right now, not tomorrow, but someday, when you're ready. When we've built enough fence and earned enough calluses and proven to ourselves that this is real. He turned to face her. I want to build a life with you, Mara. A real one. The kind that matters. Tears stung her eyes. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Is it also the only proposal you've ever heard? Yes, but still, worst. Rhett laughed. So is that a yes? It's a maybe. Ask me again in 6 months. If we haven't killed each other by then, I'll say yes. Deal. He kissed her as the stars came out one by one, each one a point of light in a darkness that no longer felt empty. And Mara thought about how strange life was, how the worst moments could lead to the best ones, how hitting bottom could teach you how to climb, how losing everything could show you what really mattered. She'd come to Broken Creek Ranch with nothing. No money, no prospects, no hope beyond the desperate need to survive one more day. And she'd found everything. A job that challenged her, a crew that respected her, a man who loved her not despite her scars but because of them. Most importantly, she'd found herself. The version of herself that had been buried under years of failure and rejection and giving up. The version that knew how to fight, how to persist, how to stand back up no matter how many times life knocked her down. 6 months later, on a Saturday in April, Mara and Rhett stood in front of a small gathering of ranch workers, wearing their best clothes and promising to build a life together. No fancy venue, no expensive decorations, just people who'd worked together, suffered together, built something real together. Garrett officiated. He had a license from some online certification, and nobody questioned it. Ellen cried. Morrison made a toast that was equal parts sincere and inappropriate. The whole crew showed up, even the ones who'd initially doubted Mara. "You ready for this?" Rhett asked as they stood waiting for the ceremony to start. "No," Mara said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway. That's my girl." The ceremony was short and simple. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about working hard and fighting fair and never giving up on each other, even when things got difficult. Promises that sounded more like work contracts than traditional wedding vows, but that was fine. Their love had been built on work, on shared struggle, on the understanding that anything worth having required effort. When Garrett pronounced them married, the crew erupted in cheers. Someone, probably Morrison, had smuggled in champagne despite the ranch's no-alcohol policy. They drank and celebrated and danced to music from someone's phone speaker. And as Mara stood in Rhett's arms, swaying to a song she didn't recognize, surrounded by people who'd become family, she realized something important. She'd spent her whole life thinking she was running towards something: success, stability, acceptance. But the truth was, she'd been running away. From failure. From judgment. From the fear that she'd never be enough. It wasn't until she stopped running, until she planted her feet at Broken Creek Ranch and decided to stay, to fight, to prove herself, that she found what she'd been looking for all along. A place to belong. People to matter to. Work that gave her purpose. And maybe that was the lesson in all of this. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. That sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. That sometimes the person you become in the struggle is worth more than whatever you were struggling for. Mara had arrived at Broken Creek Ranch as a joke. The woman they bet against. The one who couldn't possibly survive. And she'd become the woman who proved them all wrong. Who showed that strength wasn't about size or age or fitting into some narrow definition of who gets to succeed. Strength was showing up, day after day, bleeding and hurting and keeping going. Strength was refusing to let anyone else define your worth. Strength was choosing the hard path because it was yours. As the celebration wound down and the stars came out over the valley, Mara stood with Rhett, looking at the ranch spread below them, at the fences they'd built, the work they'd done, the life they were creating together. "What are you thinking?" Rhett asked. "I'm thinking that I used to be scared of failing, but now I'm more scared of not trying." That's growth right there. "Yeah," she leaned against him. "And I'm thinking that maybe I finally understand what home means." "What's that?" "It's not a place. It's people. It's work that matters. It's waking up every day and choosing to be there, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Rhett wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're going to do great things here. Build programs, train new workers, change how this whole industry thinks about who can do this work. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of potential." He kissed the top of her head. "But you don't have to do it alone. That's what I'm here for. And if I fail, then we fail together, and then we get up and try again." Mara thought about that, about having someone who wouldn't leave when things got hard, who'd stand beside her in the struggle instead of walking away from it, about how rare that was, and how precious. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood there as the night deepened and the ranch quieted and the first week of their marriage began. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fences to build, crews to lead, skeptics to prove wrong. But tonight was just for them, for celebrating what they'd built and what they were building. For remembering that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. That sometimes losing everything teaches you what really matters. That sometimes the person everyone bets against becomes the person everyone looks up to. Not because she was perfect, but because she was persistent. Not because she never fell, but because she always got back up. Not because the journey was easy, but because she decided it was worth taking. And in the end, maybe that's what strength really is. Not the absence of fear or failure or pain, but the decision to keep going despite all three. To build something real in a world that tries to tear you down. To prove, not to anyone else, but to yourself, that you're more than the sum of your mistakes. Mara Kessler had come to Broken Creek Ranch broken, beaten down by life, and expecting nothing but one more failure in a long line of them. She left that version of herself behind somewhere between the first fence post and the last, somewhere between being laughed at and being respected, somewhere between surviving and living. And the woman she became, scarred and strong, imperfect and persistent, was worth every drop of blood, every moment of pain, every second of doubt that it took to build her. Because in the end, she learned the most important lesson of all, that the only person who gets to define your worth is you. And if you decide you're worth fighting for, nothing can stop you from proving it. Not age, not circumstance, not the voices that say you can't or shouldn't or won't. Just you, showing up every day, refusing to quit, building something real from the wreckage of what came before. That's not just survival, that's triumph, and that's a story worth telling.